Time now for a midweek check-in of some major political developments so far this week with Rylan Barton, who is an editor with NPR, National Public Radio. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Renee.
So let's start with some state news before we talk about what's happening on the federal front. There was a group of students, and we've already reported this earlier in our broadcast this evening, who have filed a lawsuit against the state, alleging that the state is providing an inadequate and inequitable public education. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of that lawsuit are those two words, inadequate and inequitable, because what it is trying to do is refer back to the landmark 1989 Supreme Court decision, as mentioned in that story, Rose versus Council for Better Education, that forced the state legislature to provide more education funding and spread it across the state more equitably. So a big part of that lawsuit was that richer, more urban school districts were better funded than poorer, more rural ones. And part of what this lawsuit alleges is that the state is really slid back from that over the years, especially when you account for inflation, that it has gotten more inequitable in those ways, but also just overall that there isn't enough education funding. But they're also calling for more than that, saying that this also comes down to how teachers are paid, just the quality of education that Kentucky school districts are getting, and that's also reflected in the test scores that Kentucky students have been logging in recent years. So it's an interesting attempt to try and renew the call of the Supreme Court back in 1989 for the legislature to do that. The lawsuit names Republican leaders of the legislature saying that they haven't done enough to fund education, and they've responded saying that in fact they have. They've more than accounted for the loss in inflation, and they've also said that really what they're going to do is not pour more money into the education system, but rather they're calling for more accountability, which is really something that's a big dividing line.
And the Kentucky Student Voice team is also saying they're going to hold public hearings across the state to get input from stakeholders and perhaps craft some recommendations. So the lawsuit is just one part of their activism on this front. Also in the state house, a state Representative Daniel Grossberg, a Louisville Democrat, is again in the news, Ryland, and a second ethics complaint has been filed against him. Tell us more about this.
Right, and we don't know the specifics of that ethics complaint yet. We just know that it has happened. So there was an earlier ethics complaint that was filed actually by Democratic leaders, and this is he's a Democratic state representative, alleging this is a lot of this is based on reporting from the Lexington Herald Leader, which exposed this that he had been behaving inappropriately towards women, staffers in the legislature, and also had crossed some ethical boundaries when it came to business deals that he had made, including purchasing a car and some other things. So Democrats have really been trying to distance themselves from him. They filed this ethics complaint against him. They also removed him from certain interim committees, which don't necessarily have power. They're reviewing legislation. Interesting twist to this, which we've talked a little bit about earlier, is that he's been put back on committees, or he's on committees this legislative session, but that's really because of the Republican leaders of the legislature have done that, which is Democrats have seen that as a bit of a political move when they are really trying to distance themselves from him. They're not caucusing with him, but he still does have those seats on those committees where he can he'll be playing an important role in advancing legislation or not through the legislature right now. So we'll find out what the second complaint is and who it's by. It's a little bit of a mystery right now, but this is the Kentucky Legislative Ethics Commission. They oversee this, and it'll take some time for this to roll out.
Yeah, something to keep our eyes on for sure. Turning now to Washington developments, Kentucky's 1st District Congressman James Comer, who is head of the powerful Oversight Committee, has a book coming out this week, and it's called All the President's Money, Investigating the Secret Foreign Schemes That Made the Biden Family Rich. But there is a claim by a famous investigative journalist that he was misquoted in this work.
Yeah, basically the most famous American journalist, Bob Woodward. Jamie Comer had a dinner with Bob Woodward and his reporting partner, Robert Costa. It lasted about 3 hours. And Comer pulled some quotes from this and also paraphrase some moments in this conversation where Woodward was kind of agreeing with a lot of with Comer's investigative edge, which he had been investigating the former or current President Biden and alleging that his family had been peddling influence, and in these quotes, Bob Woodward was agreeing with him and saying that yes, this is the case, but it's going to be very hard to prove that. And also some quotes denigrating the current Washington political journalism, saying, touting what he was able to do with Watergate, but also criticizing that current journalists aren't able to get anything done. He said that he reviewed those 3 hours of tape and wasn't able to find what Comer was talking about in that conversation. And by the way, the title of that book, All the President's Money, is a reference to the book about Watergate, All the President's Men. So he's really trying to tie those connections to Bob Woodward, but the connection isn't really holding up even before the book comes out.
Yeah. Last item, Kentucky's 4th District Congressman Thomas Massie also made news this week, just yesterday, by saying that he volunteered to remove himself from the House Rules Committee. But this is in reaction to him not being on the side of Speaker Johnson.
Right, and also apparently he wasn't going to be on the House Rules Committee in this upcoming Congress, which it's a powerful committee, and the reason he had gotten on that committee was through a deal when Speaker McCarthy was elected, and a deal with some of the more conservative Freedom Caucus members of Congress. This is a bit of a blow to Massie, although he says it's not in retaliation for him but voting against House Speaker Mike Johnson. But he was the lone no vote there. And also, it's important to point out that in his time on the Rules Committee, he got in the way of several procedural processes that Republican leaders were attempting to make. I guess, and in this recent version of the Republican House, they don't need Massie, or they felt like they don't need Massie's vote there, that he's just going to get in the way there. But just already looking at what's happening here, Massie's become a bit of that one vote that Republicans really have to consider because the margin's so tight in the House right now, and he so wants to kind of stop some institutional momentum in Congress that they're going to have to consider what happens.
Well, there's not a lot of things to talk, not a lack of things to talk about for sure, and more to keep our eyes on. And we appreciate you, Rylan, for doing it.
Thanks, Renee.